Estribillo: la luz de la mañana no me saludó, solo el dolor persistente en mis huesos. 75 años es una cifra considerable, sobre todo cuando uno se levanta solo en una morada silenciosa. El espacio a mi lado en la cama ha estado vacío durante 5 años. Todavía me vuelvo instintivamente hacia donde una vez descansó Eleanor. A veces, extiendo la mano, esperando su calor, pero solo encuentro una sábana fresca. Esta casa en South Sioux City se siente demasiado grande para un anciano solitario. 2 plantas, 4 dormitorios, una sala de estar con chimenea, una cocina donde Eleanor preparaba sus famosos muffins de arándanos los domingos. Ahora, rara vez entro en esa cocina. Dependo de las comidas preparadas o las cenas en el microondas. Las estanterías de la sala, antes llenas de tomos de economía y finanzas, ahora acumulan polvo, una reliquia de mis 40 años de carrera como experto financiero. Eleanor siempre me animó a pasar más tiempo con Ree, nuestro único hijo. Necesita tu atención, Irwin, solía decir. Estaba demasiado ocupado forjando una carrera, asegurando el futuro de nuestra familia. Irónicamente, ahora que tengo tiempo de sobra, Ree solo aparece cuando necesita algo. Con dificultad para levantarme, me pongo la bata y bajo las escaleras con cuidado, agarrándome a la barandilla. Debería considerar instalar un ascensor, pero la idea de admitir la derrota en las escaleras me resulta repugnante. Preparo café, lo único que sigo preparándome. Noto la luz roja parpadeante del contestador. 4 mensajes, 3 de Ree y 1 de su esposa, Audrey. Es 15 años menor que mi hijo, abogada especializada en litigios inmobiliarios. Nunca lo he dicho, pero siempre sentí que veía a mi hijo más como un medio para un fin que como un verdadero compañero. Ree heredó mi interés por las finanzas, pero no mi disciplina. Trabaja como corredor de bolsa, pero su estilo de vida siempre supera sus ingresos. Padre, soy Ree. Audrey y yo iremos a visitarte sobre las 3 de hoy. Hay un asunto importante. Nada significativo, solo algo que tenemos que hablar. Doy un sorbo a mi café, con una sonrisa irónica extendiéndose. Asunto importante se ha convertido últimamente en un término cortés para hablar de mi dinero. Desde que Eleanor falleció, las visitas de Ree han aumentado notablemente. Solíamos vernos solo en días festivos como Navidad y Acción de Gracias. Ahora viene 2 veces al mes. No es que me importe. Un anciano agradece la compañía, incluso si los motivos son sospechosos. La mañana transcurre lentamente. Hojeo el periódico, todavía suscrito por costumbre, aunque las noticias se encuentran fácilmente en línea. Después de comer, me dirijo al pequeño jardín detrás de la casa, donde florecen las queridas rosas de Eleanor. Cuido el jardín, a pesar de mis limitados conocimientos de horticultura. Es mi forma de preservar su memoria. Te reirías de tu viejo, Elle, murmuro, cortando ramas secas. ¿Recuerdas nuestros sueños de envejecer aquí juntos? Sentados en el porche, tomados de la mano, viendo la puesta de sol. Solo el viento responde, susurrando las hojas de los arces que plantamos cuando nos mudamos a esta casa hace 3 décadas. A las 3 en punto, suena el timbre. Ree y Audrey siempre son puntuales cuando hay dinero de por medio. Abro la puerta, ofreciéndoles una sonrisa que no llega a mis ojos. Papá. Ree me abraza con exagerada calidez. Es alto, como yo de joven, aunque se le está acabando el pelo. Viste de forma cara pero informal, un jersey de cachemira, vaqueros de diseño. Audrey me sigue, esbelta, impecablemente maquillada, con el pelo oscuro recogido en un moño apretado. Me besa en la mejilla, dejando un ligero rastro de perfume caro. ¿Cómo estás, Irwin? Pregunta, con sus ojos grises desprovistos de calidez. Te ves ágil para tu edad, respondo, y Audrey suelta una risa forzada. Pasa, he preparado té. Me siguen a la sala de estar, donde una tetera y tazas esperan sobre una mesa antigua. Eleanor la adquirió en una subasta hace 20 años, gastándose una pequeña fortuna. Es una inversión en belleza, había insistido. Y bien, ¿qué tal el trabajo, hijo? Pregunto, sirviendo el té. Bien, papá. El mercado está fuerte. Tengo clientes prometedores. Ree habla con seguridad, pero noto que evita mi mirada. ¿Y tu empresa, Audrey? ¿Muchas disputas inmobiliarias últimamente? Bastantes, responde con reservas. Pero no estamos aquí para hablar de trabajo. Sí, papá, añade Ree, dejando la taza. Audrey y yo estamos muy preocupados por ti. Arqueo una ceja, esperando a que continúe. Vives solo en esta casa tan grande. Hemos notado que te has vuelto un poco despistado. Despistado. Repito. ¿Qué quieres decir? Bueno, por ejemplo, la última vez olvidaste nuestra reunión programada, interviene Audrey. Y tu jardín. Las rosas ya no parecen tan bien cuidadas como antes. Recuerdo claramente su visita inesperada la última vez, y las rosas lucen exactamente como deberían a principios de otoño. Pero prefiero no discutir. ¿Cuál es tu objetivo? Pregunto directamente. Ree y Audrey intercambian miradas. Creemos que deberías pensar en tu futuro, dice Ree, en concreto, en cómo proteger tus bienes. Mis bienes. Finjo sorpresa. ¿Qué les pasa?
Erwin.
Audrey se inclina hacia adelante, con un tono tranquilizador. En nuestro bufete, veo con frecuencia personas mayores que son víctimas de estafas o tienen problemas de herencia por falta de documentación. Tengo testamento, respondo. Y no soy tan mayor como para no poder administrar mis propias finanzas. Por supuesto, padre, intenta parecer reconfortante. Pero hablamos de medidas preventivas, como que un fideicomisario supervise tus cuentas. ¿Y quién las administraría? Pregunto, aunque ya sé la respuesta. Yo podría, dice Ree, o Audrey y yo juntas. Es una práctica común. Mucha gente de tu edad delega la gestión financiera a sus hijos. Miro por la ventana el arce que Eleanor y yo plantamos. Sus hojas empiezan a amarillar. Me pregunto qué me aconsejaría ahora. Eleanor siempre veía lo mejor en las personas, especialmente en nuestro hijo. Y la casa también. Pregunto. ¿Quiere que transfiera la propiedad de la casa? No inmediatamente, responde Audrey rápidamente. Pero sería prudente considerar la copropiedad. Le protegería de posibles consecuencias fiscales al heredar. Asiento, fingiendo sopesar su sugerencia. En realidad, estoy considerando la habilidad con la que están eludiendo el meollo del asunto. ¿Por qué quieren acceder a mi dinero ahora, mientras sigo viva? Sabes, hijo, digo tras una pausa, entiendo tu aprensión, pero preferiría hablarlo con mi asesor financiero. No quiero tomar decisiones precipitadas. El rostro de Ree se tensa brevemente, pero enseguida recupera la sonrisa. Por supuesto, padre, es perfectamente lógico. Solo queríamos plantear el tema. Le dejaremos los documentos, añade Audrey, sacando una carpeta de su costoso bolso. Aquí tiene ejemplos de poderes notariales y datos del fideicomiso. Revíselos cuando quiera. Acepto la carpeta, sintiendo su peso, no solo físico, sino simbólico. Representa el primer paso para despojarme del control sobre mi propia existencia. Gracias, digo. Las examinaré con cuidado. Padre, dice Ree, poniéndose serio de repente. Estamos realmente preocupados por ti, no solo por tu dinero. Pasas demasiado tiempo solo. Por un momento, quiero creer en su sinceridad. Quizás, en el fondo, mi hijo se preocupa de verdad por mí, no solo por mi herencia. Pero entonces recuerdo cómo olvidó mi cumpleaños el año pasado. Como rara vez llamaba para ver cómo estaba antes de la muerte de Eleanor. Estoy bien, Ree. Tengo mis libros, mi jardín. A veces veo a Noel. Jugamos al ajedrez. Noel. Audrey frunce el ceño. ¿Tu antiguo colega? No es, bueno, una persona muy de fiar, ¿verdad? Reprimo una sonrisa. Noel es el único de mis amigos que desconfía abiertamente de Ree y Audrey. Con razón lo desaprueban. Ha sido mi amigo durante 40 años, respondo con calma, y confío en su criterio. La conversación deriva a otros temas, el tiempo, la política, un nuevo restaurante en el centro. Pero siento que la tensión persiste. La carpeta reposa sobre la mesa, entre nosotros, como un reloj. Cuando finalmente se van, prometiendo una visita en una semana, cierro la puerta tras ellos. Y por primera vez durante su visita, respiro hondo. De vuelta en la sala, tomo la carpeta y reviso los papeles. Tal como sospechaba, un poder notarial que otorga amplias facultades, permitiendo a Ree y a Audrey administrar todos mis bienes, incluyendo propiedades y cuentas bancarias. ¿Qué opinas, Elle? Le pregunto a la foto de mi esposa sobre la repisa de la chimenea. Nuestro hijo se ha convertido en el hombre que esperábamos. Eleanor sonríe desde la foto, igual que hace 20 años. Cabello rubio, cálidos ojos marrones, una sonrisa que siempre me derretía el corazón. Sé que dirías que le demos una oportunidad, continuó. Que en el fondo es un buen chico. Pero no estoy tan segura, ella. Para nada. Dejé los papeles a un lado y me acerqué a la ventana. El sol se ponía, tiñendo el cielo de South Sioux City de tonos naranjas y morados. Nuestro arce proyectaba una larga sombra sobre el césped. En ese momento, decidí no firmar nada. Además, mañana contactaría con mi asesor bancario y mi abogado. Quizás debería hacer algunos ajustes en mis finanzas, pero no los que Rhea y Audrey esperaban. Al día siguiente, me encontré con Noel en nuestra cafetería habitual, de Blue Cap, en la intersección de Oak Street y Pine Avenue. Llevaba 30 años allí, y el dueño, Hugh Keats, nos conocía a Noel y a mí como clientes habituales. La cafetería era pequeña, con solo 6 mesas, paredes azules y geranios en los alféizares. Noel y yo siempre elegíamos la mesa de la esquina junto a la ventana. Noel Pritchett es mi mejor amigo. Nos conocimos cuando ambos empezábamos nuestras carreras en finanzas. A diferencia de mí, él se jubiló prematuramente a los 60 y ha pasado los últimos 15 viajando y jugando al ajedrez. Es más bajo que yo, con una larga barba canosa y una mirada penetrante que parece ver a través de la gente. Bueno, dice Noel, removiendo azúcar en su expreso. Tus queridos hijos volvieron a visitarme. Asiento, dando un sorbo a mi café solo. Noel nunca tuvo hijos y siempre ha visto a Rhea con cierto escepticismo. Ayer, con una carpeta con documentos fiduciarios para mis bienes. Saco los papeles doblados de mi bolsillo y se los ofrezco a Noel. Quieren que firme un poder notarial, para mi propia protección, claro. Noel examina los papeles, con una expresión cada vez más seria. Este es un poder notarial extraordinariamente amplio, comenta, devolviéndoles los documentos. Tendrán control sobre todo, cuentas, inversiones, bienes raíces. Control prácticamente total. Y, fíjate, sin limitaciones ni responsabilidades ante ti. Exactamente. Guardo los papeles en mi bolsillo. Incluso insinuaron que me estoy volviendo olvidadizo. Noel resopla. El hombre que aún recuerda números de teléfono de hace 50 años. Me ganaste al ajedrez 3 de 5 partidas y compito en torneos para personas mayores. Le ofrezco una débil sonrisa. Sin embargo, intentan crear la impresión de que estoy perdiendo mis facultades. Audrey incluso mencionó mi jardín. Dijo que parecía descuidado. ¿Y cuál fue tu respuesta? Pregunta Noel. Les dije que lo consideraría, que me gustaría consultar con un asesor financiero. Noel asiente, tarareando con aprobación. Inteligente. No es una negativa rotunda, pero tampoco un acuerdo. Se acerca. ¿Qué harás? Miro por la ventana, absorta en mis pensamientos. La gente camina por la calle, siguiendo con sus vidas. Una madre joven empuja un cochecito. 2 adolescentes se ríen con sus teléfonos. Sabes, sospecho que algo anda mal aquí. Rhea nunca ha mostrado mucho interés en mis asuntos. Ahora, de repente, está muy preocupado. Me vuelvo hacia Noel. Quiero investigar un poco. ¿Qué clase de investigación? Noel se inclina hacia adelante con curiosidad en la mirada. Creo que Rhea tiene dificultades económicas y necesita mi dinero. No sería la primera vez, observa Noel. Tiene razón. Recuerdo que Rhea buscó mi ayuda en el pasado. A los 25 años, pidió prestada una suma considerable para la entrada de un apartamento y nunca la devolvió. Considéralo una herencia anticipada, papá, dijo con una sonrisa despreocupada. Luego estaba la inversión fallida en la startup de un amigo, otro préstamo que desapareció sin dejar rastro y, por supuesto, su lujosa boda con Audrey hace 10 años, un evento con 200 invitados en un club de campo, que financié por completo. Pero esta vez, es más serio, aclaro. Quieren el control total de mis finanzas, no solo un préstamo único. ¿Qué descubrirás exactamente? Pregunta Noel. Para empezar, si Rhea es realmente tan competente en su profesión como dice. Tomo otro sorbo de café. Aún tienes contactos en el mundo financiero, ¿verdad? Sonríe Noel. Claro. ¿Qué información buscas? Pregunta. Averiguar cómo le va a su firma de corretaje y, si es posible, si tiene deudas personales. Lo haré. Noel asiente. Pero Irwin, déjame preguntarte esto. ¿Estás listo para lo que podrías descubrir? Reflexiono. ¿Estoy listo para saber que mi único hijo probablemente me ve solo como una fuente de ingresos? Sabes, digo tras una pausa, lo sospechaba desde hace mucho tiempo. Simplemente no quería reconocerlo. Por Eleanor, ella siempre tuvo fe en él. Noel me pone una mano en el hombro. Eleanor era un alma benévola. Veía lo mejor en cada persona. Pero a veces, la gente no está a la altura de nuestras expectativas. Terminamos nuestro café, hablando de actualidad y política. Quedamos en vernos en unos días. Noel promete haber recopilado información para entonces. De vuelta a casa, saco una vieja caja de la despensa, donde guardo documentos y recuerdos importantes. Entre ellos está el diario de Eleanor, que mantuvo durante sus últimos años. Nunca lo leí después de su muerte, pues creía que violaría su privacidad. Pero ahora quiero entender lo que pensaba sobre nuestro hijo. ¿Percibió algo que yo no vi? Abro el diario, un pequeño libro con tapa azul y letras doradas. La letra de Eleanor es pulcra, con una ligera inclinación hacia la derecha. Hojeo las páginas hasta encontrar una entrada fechada 6 meses antes de su muerte. Ree me visitó hoy, me pidió dinero de nuevo, esta vez para una inversión. Irwin le dio un cheque sin rechistar. No hice ningún comentario, pero me preocupa que nuestro hijo, de 40 y tantos, siga pidiéndonos ayuda económica. ¿Qué pasará cuando ya no estemos? Rezo para que aprenda a ser autosuficiente. Paso unas cuantas páginas más. Audrey llamó hoy, preguntó por nuestro testamento y dijo que se ofrece a ayudarnos con los aspectos legales de la sucesión sin coste alguno. Es un gesto considerado de su parte, pero por alguna razón, me siento incómoda. Quizás simplemente me estoy volviendo una vieja desconfiada. Pero noté que sus ojos se iluminaron cuando Irwin mencionó que su cartera de jubilación había subido un 15% este trimestre. Cierro el diario con un sentimiento de tristeza. Así que incluso Eleanor, con su naturaleza confiada, presentía que algo andaba mal. A la mañana siguiente, llamo a mi asesor bancario, Lial Fenn, y concertó una reunión para las 2 de la tarde. Lial ha sido mi asesor durante 20 años. Es 25 años menor que yo, pero confío en su criterio profesional. La oficina de Fenn está en el South Suez City Business Center, un edificio de cristal con vistas al río. La recepcionista me acompaña a la oficina de Lial, una espaciosa sala con ventanas panorámicas y decoración minimalista. Irwin. Lial se levanta de su escritorio para estrecharme la mano. Me alegra verte. ¿Cómo estás de salud? A mi edad, cada día sin un nuevo dolor es un triunfo, respondo con una leve risita. Intercambiamos los saludos habituales. Entonces Lial pregunta el motivo de mi visita. Tengo algunas preocupaciones, empiezo. Mi hijo y su esposa me propusieron hace poco firmar un poder notarial, otorgándoles el control sobre mis bienes. Saco los documentos y se los entrego a Lial. Los examina con atención, con expresión seria. Este es un poder notarial muy amplio, Irwin, afirma. Les da derecho a administrar todos tus bienes sin limitaciones. Eso creía. Asiento. ¿Cuál es tu recomendación? Lial deja los documentos a un lado y me mira. Francamente, no te recomendaría firmar esto, al menos no en este formato. Si quieres proteger tus bienes en caso de incapacidad, hay alternativas mucho más seguras. Por ejemplo, un fideicomiso con un fideicomisario independiente o un poder notarial con facultades restringidas. Asiento, asimilando la información. Hay algo más, añado. Sospecho que mi hijo puede tener dificultades económicas. ¿Hay algo que pueda averiguar al respecto? Lial se frota la barbilla pensativo. No puedo consultar directamente el historial crediticio de su hijo sin su permiso, pero, hace una pausa, hubo un incidente que debería conocer. ¿Qué incidente? Pregunto, tenso. Hace un mes, el banco recibió una solicitud de préstamo con su casa como garantía. La solicitud fue denegada porque el solicitante no era el propietario. Lial me mira directamente a los ojos. El solicitante era R.S. Travers. Un escalofrío me recorre la espalda. ¿Estás seguro? Totalmente. Lo noté porque conozco a su familia. No quise molestarlo en ese momento, pensando que podría haber un malentendido, pero ahora, a la luz de lo que me ha contado. Mi hijo intentó hipotecar mi casa, digo en voz baja. Sin mi conocimiento. Me temo que sí, asiente Lial. Y a juzgar por el monto del préstamo, necesitaba una suma considerable. ¿Cuánto? $750,000. Me recuesto en la silla, intentando procesar la información. 750,000. ¿Para qué necesitaba Ree esa cantidad de dinero? Irwin, la voz de Lial me devuelve a la realidad. Te recomiendo que tomes algunas precauciones. Primero, asegúrate de que el banco restrinja las transacciones en tus cuentas sin tu presencia. Segundo, sería prudente implementar medidas de protección adicionales para la banca en línea. ¿Crees que podría intentar acceder a mis cuentas? No quiero sacar conclusiones precipitadas, responde Lial con cautela. Pero en mi experiencia, ha habido casos desafortunados en los que familiares han intentado apropiarse indebidamente de los bienes de personas mayores. Más vale prevenir que curar. Asiento, con la amarga sensación de la precisión de Lial. Mi propio hijo. Hay algo más, continúa Lial. Si tu hijo está realmente en serios problemas financieros, podría recurrir a métodos poco convencionales. Podría intentar falsificar tu firma en documentos o convencerte de que firmes algo sin explicarte completamente las implicaciones. ¿Qué me aconsejas? El primer paso es contactar a su abogado de inmediato. Actualice su testamento y todos los demás documentos legales. Segundo, notifique al gerente de su sucursal bancaria que no debe realizar ninguna transacción importante sin su presencia personal y verificación adicional. Tercero, tenga mucho cuidado con cualquier documento que le pidan firmar, incluso si parece inofensivo. Anoto sus recomendaciones. Mi mente funciona con claridad a pesar de mi edad y el dolor de la traición. Gracias, Lial. Agradezco su franqueza. Me levanto para irme. Lial también se levanta. Siento haber tenido que comunicarle esta noticia. Sé lo importante que es su familia para usted. Era importante, lo corrijo. Parece que ahora no tengo familia, solo un hombre con mi apellido que me ve como un cajero automático. Al salir de la oficina, decido caminar, aunque normalmente pido un taxi. Necesito pensar, despejarme. El río Big Sur fluye suavemente a mi izquierda, reflejando las nubes y los rascacielos. Me detengo en el parapeto y contemplo el agua. ¿Cuántas veces habíamos caminado Eleanor y yo hasta aquí, de la mano, soñando con el futuro, con el crecimiento de nuestro hijo, su éxito, con nuestros nietos? Nunca tuvimos nietos. Audrey dijo una vez que los hijos no encajaban en sus planes de vida. Mi teléfono vibra. Un mensaje de Noel. Necesito una charla urgente. Mañana a las 10, en el mismo sitio. Respondo con un breve, sí, y sigo caminando a casa, sintiendo una opresión en el pecho que se mezcla con una creciente determinación. Si Ree cree que puede manipularme para que piense que soy un anciano frágil, está muy equivocado. Puede que sea viejo, pero no soy ingenuo ni indefenso. Esa noche, llamo a mi abogada, Halibus, y programo una cita para pasado mañana. Luego, voy a mi estudio y saco una carpeta con mis documentos financieros. Es un buen momento para revisar mi testamento y la estructura de mis bienes. Si mi hijo busca una indemnización fácil, no la encontrará. Ver a Noel a la mañana siguiente solo confirmó mis peores temores. Nos sentamos en nuestro rincón habitual de The Blue Cap, y sus ojos, típicamente brillantes de buen humor, estaban solemnes y concentrados. Conseguí información gracias a un antiguo contacto, dijo Noel, bajando la voz aunque no había nadie más cerca. Ree está ahogado en deudas, Irwin. Debe a corredores de apuestas, a acreedores y, lo peor de todo, a personas que no recurren a los tribunales para recuperar su dinero. Apreté mi taza de café con tanta fuerza que se me pusieron los nudillos blancos. ¿Cuánto? Más de 1 millón. Probablemente mucho más. Su casa de bolsa está al borde del colapso. Los clientes se están yendo tras varias malas inversiones. Noel hizo una pausa, claramente dubitativo. Y corren rumores de malversación de fondos de clientes. ¿Apropiación indebida? Mi voz sonaba apagada. Todavía no hay nada oficial, pero si los rumores son ciertos, podría enfrentarse no solo a la ruina financiera, sino también a la cárcel. Cierro los ojos, sintiendo la ira y la tristeza luchando en mi interior. Mi hijo no es solo un irresponsable. Probablemente es un delincuente, y yo, su padre, no me había dado cuenta o preferí no hacerlo. Bueno, digo finalmente, abriendo los ojos. Entiendo por qué quería mi dinero con tanta desesperación. Está desesperado, y la desesperación hace a la gente peligrosa, comenta Noel. Ten cuidado, amigo. Lo haré. Ayer ya hablé con el banco sobre la protección mejorada de cuentas, y hoy tengo una cita con un abogado. Noel asiente con aprobación. Una sabia decisión, pero recuerda, estamos hablando de tu hijo. Conoce tus rutinas, tus hábitos, quizás incluso tus contraseñas. ¿Crees que es capaz de? No puedo terminar la frase, incapaz de expresar el pensamiento. No sé de qué es capaz cuando está acorralado, afirma Noel. Pero sí sé que el miedo a la ruina y al encarcelamiento puede transformar a una persona en alguien irreconocible. El resto del día transcurrió en una neblina. Me reuní con Hallie Bus, mi abogada, y redactamos un nuevo testamento. Excluí a Ree y a Audrey, y destiné todos mis bienes a un fideicomiso con instrucciones claras para contribuciones caritativas. Hallie también ofreció solicitar una orden de alejamiento contra Ree, pero la rechacé por ahora. A pesar de todo, no podía imaginar a mi hijo capaz de causar daño físico. Al volver a casa esa noche, me sentía agotado. Un silencio opresivo llenaba la casa. Encendí la luz del salón y me estremecí. Por un instante, imaginé a Eleanor sentada en el sofá. Solo un juego de luces y sombras. Estaba tan cansado. Ya estaba imaginando a mi difunta esposa. ¡Ay, ella!, murmuré, hundiéndome en el sillón. ¿Qué harías tú en mi situación? Sabía la respuesta. Le daría a Ree otra oportunidad, y otra, y otra. Eleanor siempre creyó en las segundas oportunidades, pero yo no era como ella. Tenía casi 80 años y me faltaba tiempo y energía para decepciones interminables. La mañana empezó con una llamada telefónica. Acababa de ducharme y estaba a punto de desayunar cuando sonó el teléfono fijo. Era temprano, las 9. Irwin Travers, respondí. Señor Travers, soy Julian Hardwick, del First National Bank. Hablamos hace poco sobre seguridad adicional para sus cuentas. Sí, señor Hardwick. Lo recuerdo. La voz del banquero sonaba tensa, lo que me alarmó. ¿Pasó algo? Me temo que sí. Su hijo, Ree Travers, visitó nuestra sucursal esta mañana. Presentó un poder notarial en su nombre e intentó retirar todos los fondos de sus cuentas. Sentí que la habitación daba vueltas. ¿Poder notarial? No firmé nada. ¿Qué poder notarial? Pregunté, intentando mantener la calma. Un documento fechado anteayer, con su firma, o lo que parece ser su firma. Hardwick hizo una pausa. Según lo acordado ayer, el personal solicitó más información y se puso en contacto conmigo. Enseguida me di cuenta de que algo no iba bien y lo llamé. Hiciste lo correcto, lo elogié, aunque estaba furioso por dentro. El poder notarial era falso. Nunca firmé tal documento. Eso es lo que sospechaba. El banquero parecía aliviado. Le negamos al señor Travers el acceso a las cuentas, alegando la necesidad de una verificación adicional. No le gustó. Me lo imagino, respondí secamente. Señor Travers, continuó Hardwick. Dada la gravedad de la situación, quizás debería considerar presentar una denuncia policial. Falsificar un poder notarial es un delito penal. Cerré los ojos. ¿Presentar una denuncia contra mi propio hijo? ¿Enviarlo a la cárcel? Sí, lo pensaré, respondí. Mientras tanto, me gustaría tomar algunas precauciones más. Quizás debería ir al banco en persona. Claro, puedo verte en una hora si te parece bien. Estaré allí a las 10. Después de colgar, me senté a la mesa de la cocina, intentando ordenar mis ideas. Mi hijo falsificó mi firma, intentó robarme todo el dinero. Mi hijo, a quien crié, eduqué y le di todas las oportunidades. El Ree que Eleanor tanto quería, en quien tanto creía. La amargura y la ira me invadieron, pero me obligué a calmarme. No era momento de emociones. Era momento de actuar. Desayuné rápido, me vestí y paré un taxi. De camino al banco, llamé a Hallie Bus y le expliqué brevemente la situación. Prometió preparar la documentación necesaria y reunirse conmigo en el banco. La oficina del First National Bank estaba en un edificio histórico en el centro de South Sioux City. Columnas de mármol, techos altos, una sensación de confianza y permanencia. Hardwick me recibió en el vestíbulo. Un hombre alto y esbelto, de unos 50 años, con un corte de pelo impecable y un traje impecable. Sr. Travers, me estrechó la mano con firmeza. Por favor, venga a mi oficina. Subimos al segundo piso, donde se encontraban las oficinas de la gerencia del banco. La oficina de Hardwick estaba decorada con madera oscura y cuero, una estética bancaria clásica. Hallie Bush ya estaba allí, una mujer delgada de mediana edad, pelirroja y corta, y mirada penetrante. Irwin se adelantó para saludarme. He preparado los documentos que discutimos. Gracias, Hallie. Le estreché la mano y tomé asiento. Entonces, comenzó Hardwick, hablemos sobre qué medidas podemos tomar para proteger sus bienes. Quiero cerrar todas las cuentas conjuntas con mi hijo, dije, y quiero revocar cualquier poder notarial que se haya emitido a nombre de él o de su esposa. Hardwick asintió. Eso se puede hacer de inmediato. Tiene 2 cuentas conjuntas con el señor R.S. Travers, una cuenta de ahorros y una cuenta de inversión. Podemos cerrarlas y transferir los fondos a sus cuentas personales. Hágalo. En cuanto a los poderes notariales, intervino Hallie, he redactado una declaración revocando todos los poderes notariales previamente otorgados. Entrará en vigor inmediatamente después de la certificación notarial. Podemos gestionarlo aquí mismo, sugirió Hardwick. Tenemos un notario en plantilla. Asentí, sintiendo una extraña sensación de alivio, como si cortara un nudo complejo. Hay algo más, añadí tras una pausa. Quiero cambiar todas las contraseñas y códigos de acceso de mis cuentas, y quiero asegurarme de que nadie más que yo pueda acceder a ellas. Ni en persona, ni en línea, ni por teléfono. Es prudente, asintió Hardwick. Implementaremos la autenticación multifactor en todas sus cuentas y añadiremos una nota especial en el sistema que indique que cualquier transacción requiere su presencia personal y verificación adicional. Una última cosa, dije, sacando un sobre del bolsillo interior de mi chaqueta. Quiero excluir a mi hijo y a su esposa de mi testamento. Hallie ya ha preparado una nueva versión, pero quiero que el banco también esté al tanto de mis intenciones. Hardwick aceptó el sobre con cierta sorpresa. Es una solicitud inusual, pero entiendo sus razones. Añadiremos esta información a su expediente de cliente. La siguiente hora transcurrió en papeleo. Firmé documentos, elegí nuevas contraseñas, respondí preguntas para una verificación adicional. Cada firma, cada decisión, me distanciaba de mi hijo, cortando lazos que habían existido durante décadas. Sentí una extraña mezcla de amargura y liberación. Eso es todo, señor Travers, dijo finalmente Hardwick. Sus cuentas ahora están seguras. Las cuentas conjuntas con su hijo están cerradas. Todos los poderes notariales revocados. Nadie podrá acceder a sus bienes sin su presencia personal y múltiples niveles de verificación. Gracias, me puse de pie, cansado pero decidido. No tiene idea de lo crucial que es esto para mí. Lo entiendo, dijo Hardwick con seriedad. Y lamento mucho que haya tenido que lidiar con esta situación. Hallie salió del banco conmigo. Estaba nublado y empezó a llover. ¿Está seguro de que no quiere presentar una denuncia? Preguntó mientras esperábamos mi taxi. Estoy seguro, respondí. No quiero ver a mi hijo encarcelado. Me basta con saber que ya no podrá acceder a mi dinero. Es su decisión, Irwin, me puso una mano en el hombro. Pero si lo reconsideras o surge algún problema nuevo, llámame cuando quieras. Llegó el taxi y conduje a casa, observando cómo pasaban las calles de South Sioux City. La ciudad donde había pasado la mayor parte de mi vida de repente me parecía ajena. O quizás era yo quien me sentía ajeno a mí mismo. Un anciano que había cortado los últimos lazos con su propio hijo. En casa, preparé té y me senté en una silla junto a la ventana, contemplando el jardín. La lluvia arreciaba, las gotas difuminaban los contornos de las rosas y los arces en el cristal. Pensé en Eleanor, en cómo adoraba el sonido de la lluvia. En cómo nos sentamos juntos en silencio, sin necesidad de palabras. Lo siento, ella, pensé. No logré mantener a nuestra familia unida. No pude criar a nuestro hijo para que fuera el hombre que imaginabas. El teléfono sonó alrededor de las 6 de la tarde. Sabía quién era antes de mirar la pantalla. Ree probablemente ya se había enterado de lo ocurrido en el banco. Dudé, mirando la pantalla parpadeante. Una parte de mí deseaba ignorar la llamada, aislar el dolor y la decepción. Pero la otra parte, la parte que siempre sería padre, pasara lo que pasara, me obligó a responder. Sí, dije simplemente. Papá. La voz de Ree tembló. Un dejo de pánico y desesperación que no había notado antes. ¿Qué has hecho? ¿Por qué cerraste nuestras cuentas conjuntas? ¿Por qué intentaste retirar todo el dinero de mis cuentas personales con un poder notarial falso? Repliqué pregunta tras pregunta, sorprendido por la calma en mi voz. Una pausa. Podía oír a Ree respirar agitadamente. Es un malentendido, dijo finalmente. No falsifiqué ningún poder notarial. Solo quería proteger tu dinero. Llevarlo a un lugar más seguro. Deja de mentir, Ree. Suspiré. El banco me mostró un documento con mi firma falsificada. No solo intentaste robarme el dinero. Cometiste un delito. Papá, por favor. Su voz se apagó. You don't understand. I'm in a desperate situation.
I needed that money to pay off my debts.
I pay you back.
I swear. How did you repay me for the apartment, or the wedding, or that failed startup?
I felt bitterness welling inside me. You never return anything, Ree.
You just take and take. Yes, I'll make it right, Dad.
Give me another chance, please.
He sounded truly desperate. If not for me, then for Mom.
You know she'd want you to forgive me.
At the mention of Eleanor, something inside me snapped. He had no right to invoke her memory like that. Don't you dare involve your mother in this.
My voice grew sharper.
She loved you unconditionally, but even her love wasn't blind. She wrote in her diary about her worries that you would never learn to stand on your own 2 feet. You read her diary? Ree sounded shocked. Yes. And do you know what I found?
She saw your avarice.
She saw how Audrey's eyes lit up when you discussed money. She simply didn't want to believe it. Neither did I.
Silence on the other.
Then I heard a soft sob.
Daddy, I beg you. Ree's voice shook with tears.
I'm sorry. I made a terrible mistake. I know I betrayed your trust, but I am your son, your flesh and blood. Will you just cut me out of your life? I closed my eyes, feeling something inside me finally give way. Something I'd tried to keep alive all these years, belief in my son. Hope that he would eventually become a man I could be proud of. I've already cut you out, Ree, I said quietly. You're removed from the will. All powers of attorney have been revoked. You won't receive another cent from me.
You can't do this.
His voice shifted from fear to anger.
I'm entitled to my inheritance.
It's family money. It's my money, I said firmly. I earned it over 40 years, and I decide who receives it.
I buried it in my will.
Everything will go to charity.
You're insane.
Ree screamed. Noel set you up, didn't he? That old schemer never liked me. Noel had nothing to do with it. You made your own choices, son, I said the last word with bitter irony, when you chose to forge my signature and steal my money.
I will sue you.
Ree threatened. I'll prove that you're incompetent, that you don't know what you're doing. You can try, I grinned. But considering you just attempted fraud, I wouldn't advise drawing attention from the court system. A long pause. I could hear Ree's heavy breathing. Dad, he finally said, his voice shaking again.
Please, I'm desperate. If I don't get the money by the end of the week, I'm in serious trouble. Dangerous people.
They're threatening me. And, Audrey.
You're a grown man, Ree.
Handle your own problems, I paused, like I've always handled mine. Are you?
You're abandoning me.
There was disbelief in his voice.
Your only son.
No, Ree. You're the one who abandoned me, I said. The moment you decided my money was more important than our relationship.
The moment you forged my signature.
Goodbye.
I hung up without waiting for a response. I sat in silence, listening to the rain outside the window. An emptiness within me.
No anger, no grief, just a strange sense of relief at the decision I'd made. I had done what I needed to do, protected myself, forced my son to face the results of his actions. Would he learn from this? Would he improve? I didn't know. And to my surprise, I found I no longer cared. My responsibility for him was over. I stood and walked to the window. The rain had intensified, blurring the garden into greens and colors. But beyond the rain, the sun always returns.
He awoke to the doorbell ringing, insistent, demanding.
The clock showed 9 in the morning. I hadn't slept well since my conversation with Ree last night, waking hourly, falling back into restless sleep. My dreams were fragmented, Eleanor shaking her head reproachfully, young Reese reaching out to me, numbers and papers swirling.
The bell rang again, long persistent.
I pulled on my robe and slowly descended the stairs, taking my time. I knew who it was. Through the frosted glass of the door, I saw two figures, Ree's tall frame and Audrey's slender outline beside him. I paused a moment, collecting myself, then opened the door. Father.
Res tu donde threshold, pale, vista hier dais.
His usual immaculate appearance was gone, crumpled shirt, stubble, disheveled hair. Beside him, Audrey looked composed but tense, like a taut string. Her eyes seemed to flash.
Audrey.
I nodded, not inviting them inside. To what do I owe this early visit? You know why we're here, Ree stepped forward. We need to talk.
You can't just cut us out of your life.
I can, and I already have. I stood unmoving in the doorway. Everything was said on the phone yesterday.
Irwin. Audrey stepped closer.
Her voice was sweet, but her eyes remained cold. We understand you're upset. But let's discuss this like adults, inside, not on the doorstep. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to slam the door in their faces. But the other part, the part that still remembered the small boy I'd taught to ride a bicycle, made me step back and let them enter. 15 minutes, I said. No more. They moved into the living room. Ree sank heavily onto the sofa, while Audrey remained standing, tapping her foot nervously. Father, Ree began, his voice hoarse. I know I made a mistake.
A terrible mistake.
I should never have tried to access your accounts without permission. Not a mistake, I corrected him, still standing. A crime, forgery of documents and attempted fraud.
Okay, a felony.
Ree held up his hands, as if surrendering. I admit it. I was desperate. I have massive debts, creditors threatening me, and you thought the best solution was to steal from your own father.
I shook my head.
Not to ask for help, not to explain the situation, but simply to steal the money. I would have returned it, Ree exclaimed. I swear I would have returned every penny once I was back on my feet. How did you repay all your previous loans? I grinned. Reese lowered his head, unable to answer.
Irwin. Audrey intervened, stepping closer.
We understand your frustration, but to remove us from the will, to sever all ties, is too extreme. We're still family. Family. I raised an eyebrow. Family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't forge signatures. Family doesn't deceive. People make errors, Audrey insisted. Even in families, especially families. Isn't that what forgiveness means? Forgiveness must be earned, I replied. Not taken for granted. Ree looked up, his eyes a mix of despair and anger. What do you want me to do? He asked.
Humiliate myself before you? Crawl on my knees?
You've always been like that. Cold, calculating, even with Mom. I felt something clench inside me at his words.
Cold with Eleanor?
Didn't he see how deeply I loved her? How I'd cared for her all these years? Leave your mother out of this, I said quietly but firmly. It would break her heart to see what you've become.
No.
Ree stood up, his face contorted. It would break her heart to see you disown your own son, her only child. She always said you were too harsh on me, expected too much, that you never accepted me for who I am. I felt anger rising in me.
What are you, Re?
A liar, a thief, a man who tries to steal from his own father and then blames him for a lack of love.
I'm a man who made a mistake.
Re shouted.
A man who got caught in debt and saw no other way out. I'm your son, damn it. Your flesh and blood.
And I am your father, I replied. The man who gave you life, upbringing, education, who was always there for you when you needed help. And how have you repaid that? Re turned away, unable to find an answer. Audrey walked to him, placed a hand on his shoulder, then turned to me.
Irwin, let's all calm down.
We can find a compromise. Re is willing to compensate for the emotional distress. Perhaps some kind of formal agreement. Compromise.
I shook my head.
What kind of compromise can there be after what you did? You tried to steal my money.
You lied to my face.
You thought I was a feeble-minded old man who could be manipulated. That's not true, Audrey said quickly. We never thought you were feeble-minded. We were just concerned for your well-being. Stop it. I held up my hand. Enough lies. I saw the documents you brought last time. I saw the power of attorney Re tried to use at the bank. It was all planned. You just didn't expect me to take precautions. Audrey pursed her lips, her eyes narrowing. You can't just remove us from your life, she said, her tone shifting to defiance. We can contest your will. Prove that you were influenced by a third party, that you were not in your right mind.
He laughed, short and bitter.
Go ahead, try it. I'm sure the court will be very interested in the story of how my son tried to rob me using a forged power of attorney, and then decided to declare me incompetent when his plan failed.
Audrey's face paled.
She clearly hadn't anticipated my readiness for an open confrontation. Re sank back onto the couch, covering his face with his hands.
Look, he said, suddenly feeling weary.
I'm not going to file a police report. I'm not going to publicize this case. I don't want my son behind bars, but I'm also not going to pretend it didn't happen. Your actions have consequences, and one of them is that you will never receive my money again. Not now. Not after I'm gone. Dad, please. Re lifted his head, tears in his eyes. I know I betrayed your trust, but I can change. I can be a better person.
Just give me a chance.
For a moment, I felt doubt. Could he truly be remorseful? Maybe this was genuinely a moment of desperation, not cold calculation. But then I recalled all the past instances, how Re had sworn he'd change after each loan, how he promised to repay the money, how he'd assured me this was the last time, and how it all recurred repeatedly. No, I said firmly.
I gave you chances.
Many chances. Too many. You squandered them all.
You're a grown man now, Re.
You're 45 years old. It's time you learn to live independently. Not at your father's expense. You're a monster, Audrey said suddenly.
A cold, calculating old man with no heart.
Your son is in trouble, and you're discarding him like an unwanted object. I'm not discarding him, I replied calmly. I just stopped funding him. There's a difference. There's a difference. Audrey exclaimed. You know we're in trouble. That we're facing bankruptcy, losing our house, and you have millions just sitting in your accounts. Money you won't even be able to spend for the rest of your life. My money, I reminded her, earned by me, and I decide how I spend it and who I leave it to. It's family money.
Audrey screamed. Rese is your only heir.
You have no moral right to give it to some
outsider.
I have every right, morally and legally, I said. And I've decided that my fortune will go to charity, to help those who truly need it, those who deserve it. And I don't. Re asked quietly.
After what you've done? No.
Re stood up, his face transformed, a look of resolve mixed with bitterness. You know, Father, I've always felt I wasn't good enough for you. no matter what I did, it was never enough.
I wasn't smart enough.
I wasn't hard-working enough. I wasn't successful enough.
You always wanted me to be a copy of you. And I'm not you.
No, I agreed.
You're not me.
I never cheated my parents. I never tried to steal from them.
I built my life with my own hands, not waiting for an inheritance.
You've always been so self-satisfied, Ree shook his head. I'm all by myself. I've accomplished everything. Have you ever considered that perhaps your obsession with work, your constant absence from home, your inflated expectations are the reason I developed the way I did? That perhaps you bear some of the blame, too. His words struck me harder than I anticipated because somewhere deep inside, I knew there was some truth to them. I worked extremely hard when he was a child. I did have very high expectations for him. Perhaps I had indeed been too strict, too demanding. Maybe you're right, I said after a pause. Maybe I wasn't the perfect father. But that doesn't excuse your actions. Adults don't hold their parents responsible for their behavior. They accept the consequences of their choices. Even if those consequences destroy the family? Audrey asked. It wasn't the consequences that destroyed the family, but the actions themselves, I answered. Ree made his choice when he decided to forge my signature. When he decided that my money was more important than our relationship. It was desperation. Ree exclaimed.
You don't understand the predicament I'm in.
I'm being threatened by the people I owe. They say that if I don't pay them by the end of the week, then what? I asked. What will they do? Reese lowered his eyes. They're not the kindest people. They have ways of collecting debts. So, go to the police, I suggested. I can't. Reese shook his head.
It's complicated.
There's client money involved. If it becomes public, I could face not only bankruptcy, but jail. Embezzlement of client funds. I nodded. I already knew that. Reese looked up at me in surprise. How? I have my sources, I replied. I know about your debts, the problems in your office, how you've used client money to cover your personal expenses. I know everything, Ree, and that's why I won't believe any more of your promises. Not one vow about, this is the last time, or, you'll pay back every cent. I've heard that far too often. Ree turned even paler. Audrey walked to him and placed a hand on his shoulder, a gesture of support that seemed oddly mechanical, as if she were playing a rehearsed part. What do you suggest we do? Ree asked quietly. I can't escape this situation without your assistance. You're a grown man, Ree, I repeated. Find a way. Sell the house, sell the cars, the jewelry, all those expensive things you and Audrey cherish. Declare bankruptcy if you must.
Start from scratch. Start from scratch.
Audrey exclaimed. At our age. Do you comprehend what you're suggesting? It's
impossible.
It's quite possible, I argued. People do it constantly.
Lose everything and begin.
It's called life. That's easy for you to say, Audrey snapped. With your millions, you've never known true hardship. I laughed. And this time, I laughed heartily.
You know nothing of my life, Audrey.
I grew up in a family of 5 children. My father worked in a factory. My mother was a homemaker. We lived paycheck to paycheck. I started working at 14, delivering newspapers. I paid for my own education by working nights and weekends. So don't lecture me about true hardship. Audrey averted her eyes, unable to respond. Reese stared at the floor, his shoulders slumped. Your time is up, I said, glancing at the clock. 15 minutes have passed. I want you both to leave. Dad, please. Ree looked up at me, his eyes filled with desperation.
Don't do this. Don't disown me.
I'm not disowning you as a son, I replied.
I'm disowning you as an heir.
There is a distinction. If you ever truly wish to restore our relationship without money, without self-interest, simply as father and son, my door is open. But I won't be your ATM any longer. You're a cruel man, Audrey said, gathering her purse. And you will regret it. When you're alone, without a family, there won't even be anyone to offer you a glass of water. I'm already alone, I answered. Ever since Eleanor died, everything else was an illusion. Ree stood up, straightening, attempting to retain some semblance of dignity.
All right, father. You've made your decision.
I accept it. His voice sounded choked. But as you lie on your deathbed, remember this day.
Remember how you cast your only son out of your life for money. Not for money is shook my head.
For principle, for truth, for what I've tried to teach you all your life. That actions have consequences. That you cannot lie and cheat with impunity, even if it seems like the easiest escape. Goodbye, Erwin, Audrey said coldly, heading for the exit. I hope your principles keep you warm in your old age. Ree followed her, but stopped at the door and turned around. You know, father, my mother always said that beneath your sternness, there was a good heart, that you simply didn't know how to express your feelings. Now I realize she was mistaken. Beneath the sternness is merely coldness. He walked out, closing the door behind him, not with a slam, but quietly, almost imperceptibly. It was worse than if he had slammed it loudly.
I stood in the empty living room, staring at the closed door. Res were echoed in my head, coldness beneath the harshness.
Perhaps he was right. Maybe I truly had kept my emotions in check for too long. Too accustomed to concealing my feelings behind a facade of rationality. But that didn't alter the essential point. It didn't change what he did. It didn't change my decision. I walked to the window, watching Ree and Audrey get into their expensive car. They were arguing fiercely about something. I could see their gestures, though I couldn't hear their words. Then the car drove off, taking my son, perhaps forever, out of my life. I felt a tear trace a path down my cheek, the first in a long time. I hadn't cried even at Eleanor's funeral. I had remained strong, as always. But now, alone in an empty house, I permitted myself that weakness.
I'm sorry, he whispered, watching the car drive away.
I couldn't preserve our family. I couldn't be the father you desired for our son. The car sped around the corner, and I turned away from the window. The house suddenly seemed immense and empty. Every room, every corner, reminded me of those who were no longer here and might never be. Of Eleanor with her warm smile.
Of little Re running through the halls.
But I couldn't have acted differently. I couldn't let Ree continue to manipulate me, to exploit me. I couldn't pretend everything was fine when everything had gone so terribly wrong. I made my way into the study and sat at the desk. Opening the bottom drawer, I pulled out an old photo album, flipping through the pages. Ree as a child, Ree as a teenager, Ree with Eleanor, Ree in his graduation gown, Ree at his wedding. A whole life captured on photographic paper. Where did I go wrong? When did I lose connection with my son? When did he start seeing me only as a source of money instead of a father? I didn't know the answers. All I knew was that there was no turning back. That some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. That sometimes you must make painful decisions to uphold your dignity, your principles, your identity. It was a bitter freedom, but freedom nonetheless. A week had passed since my separation from Ree. A quiet, empty week filled with the echo of unspoken words and the unseen presence of absent individuals. I performed routine tasks, reading, gardening, occasionally shopping. Life continued, albeit with a strange sense of unreality about what was happening. On Wednesday, as usual, I met Noel at the Blue Cup. He was already waiting at our table, examining the chessboard. We sometimes played in the mornings when the cafe was less crowded.
Irwin.
Noel looked up, and I noticed an unusual expression on his face, a mixture of concern and irritation. Sit down. We need to talk.
He sat down, feeling a strange tension.
Hugh brought my usual black coffee, but instead of his customary smile, he gave me an odd look, as if appraising me.
What's happening?
I asked when Hugh stepped back.
Noel leaned closer.
You wouldn't believe what your son is doing. He's spreading rumors all over town about your condition. What do you mean? I sipped my coffee, trying to remain calm. He's telling anyone who will listen that you're suffering from senile dementia, that you've become paranoid, accusing him of imaginary conspiracies, forgetting simple things. Noel shook his head. He's even implying that your recent financial decisions are a result of dementia.
I set my cap down, feeling a cold anger rise within me.
And many people believe this nonsense? Unfortunately, yes, Noel sighed. People love gossip, especially sensational gossip. A story about a wealthy old man losing his mind and disinheriting his only son is simply too juicy to resist. That's why Hugh was looking at me so strangely, I muttered. And he wasn't the only one. Yesterday, I overheard Mrs. Donahue, remember the dentist's widow, discussing with her friends in the supermarket that poor Mr. Travers has given up and is now stalking her own son.
I shook my head, a bitter grin forming.
No wonder Ree always managed to portray himself as a victim of circumstances, even when he created those circumstances himself. This is more serious than just gossip, Irwin. Noel looked genuinely concerned. He appears to be laying the groundwork for contesting your will or even attempting to gain guardianship over you. I felt the blood drain from my face. Guardianship?
Are you serious?
I'm afraid so. Linda Fowler, my neighbor who works for social services, remembers Ree and Audrey making inquiries about the guardianship process for cognitively impaired seniors.
I sat in silence, processing this information.
My own son is attempting to have me declared incompetent. After everything that has transpired, he didn't stop, but went further, choosing a more sophisticated method to seize my money.
What will you do?
Noel asked. First, I'm going to see Haley again, I said. I need a legal defense, but also. I paused, considering the next step. I need to refute these rumors. Show people that I am of sound mind and good judgment. And how do you plan to achieve that? I don't know yet, but I will figure it out. After my meeting with Noel, I called Haley Booth and arranged a meeting for the next day. When I arrived home, I sat in a chair by the window and thought. I looked out at the garden, at the maple trees whose leaves were beginning to turn purple in the fall, and contemplated how quickly a life built over decades could unravel. I had believed that by closing the accounts and removing Ree from the will, I had brought the story to an end. But it turned out to be a comma. My son wasn't going to give up so easily. The next morning, I met with Haley in her office, a small but elegant space in the downtown business district. When I informed her about the rumors and Ree's potential plans, her usually calm face grew serious. This is a grave threat, Irwin, she said. If he can persuade the court that you're incapacitated, he could gain control of all your assets and decisions, including medical ones. But that's absurd. I objected. Anyone who spends 5 minutes with me will see that I am completely sane. Unfortunately, the courts aren't always so straightforward, Haley replied. Especially when it involves elderly individuals and substantial money. All it takes are a few instances of unusual behavior, a couple of accounts of forgetfulness or paranoid notions, and the case can take a nasty turn. What do you suggest? We need to be proactive. She opened her laptop and began typing. First, you should undergo a full medical examination, including neuropsychological testing. Obtain an official report on your cognitive status. Good. I nodded. What else? Second, we need to prepare documents that will protect you should refile a petition for guardianship. That includes a medical power of attorney and a power of attorney in the event of incapacitation, but naming individuals you truly trust. Not Ree. Noel, I said. I trust Noel. Good choice, Haley approved. And third, we need to gather evidence of Rhee's attempt to commit fraud on your accounts. That would demonstrate that his actions were not motivated by concern for you, but by a desire to gain control of your finances. I nodded, feeling the tension of the past few days ease slightly. Having a plan, concrete steps, always helped me manage my anxiety. Thank you, Haley, I said. I appreciate your help.
It's my profession.
She smiled faintly.
And Irwin, I admire your resolve.
Not everyone can stand up to their own children, even when they're clearly wrong. Her words warmed me after all the doubts and pain of the preceding weeks. It was good to hear that someone believed my actions were justified. I spent the next 2 weeks systematically executing my defense plan. I had a checkup with a neurologist, Dr. Paul Chong, who, after a series of tests, concluded that my cognitive function was above average for my age group, with no evidence of dementia or other neurocognitive disorders. I created new powers of attorney, designating Noel and Haley as decision-makers in the event of my incapacitation. I gathered all the evidence of Rhee's attempt to access my accounts, including testimony from bank employees and a copy of the forged power of attorney. But a legal defense wasn't enough. I needed to counteract the rumors Rhee continued to spread. So, I decided to act openly and directly. I started small, resuming my participation in the local library's book club, which I had abandoned after Eleanor's death. At the first meeting, I presented a brilliant analysis of T.S. Eliot's The Waste Land, causing several participants to literally open their mouths in astonishment. Then, I signed up to volunteer at the South Sioux City Community Center, where I helped seniors with financial planning, free of charge, of course. And when the local newspaper announced an essay contest about the city's history, I wrote a detailed and elegant essay on the development of South Sioux City's financial sector, which won first place. Gradually, the public perception of me began to change. People who used to cast sympathetic or suspicious glances now greeted me with respect. Hugh from the Blue Cup was smiling again, bringing my coffee. Even Mrs. Donahue, upon encountering me in the supermarket, apologetically admitted she had perhaps misunderstood the situation. But despite these small triumphs, loneliness remained my constant companion. Evenings in the empty house were especially difficult. I often sat in Eleanor's chair, looking at the pictures on the mantelpiece, and talked to her as if she could hear me.
You know, ella said one evening, sipping my whiskey. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice.
Maybe I should have simply given Rhee the money. Maybe none of this was worth it. The picture was silent, but I could almost hear what Eleanor would have said. She had always believed in principles, in honesty, in taking responsibility for one's actions. She would not have condoned our son's behavior. You're right, I sighed, responding to the imaginary answer. It's not about money. It's about truth. It's about respect. About the fact that some things cannot be bought or sold. In early November, about a month after my break with Rhee, Noel suggested a small gathering at my house. Nothing elaborate, just dinner with a few old friends. I agreed, though without much enthusiasm. Social interactions had been challenging for me lately, but the evening proved to be exactly what I needed. Noel arrived with a bottle of excellent scotch. Haley brought homemade apple pie. Dr. Chong, with whom I had unexpectedly found common ground during the examination, joined with his wife, Grace, a delightful literature teacher. Even Hugh from the Blue Cup stopped by, bringing his famous sandwiches. We sat in the living room, the fireplace crackling, a relaxed conversation flowing. No one directly mentioned Rhee or the scandal, but I could feel the support from everyone present. You know, Irwin, Dr. Chong said at one point, I admire your resilience. Many people your age prefer the path of least resistance, especially when it concerns family. I'm too old to choose the easy way out, I replied. At this stage of life, you want to be certain you're doing what's right, not what's convenient. That's a rare quality, Grace said, at any age. Irwin's always been like that, Noel cut in. I recall back in the 80s, when everyone was chasing quick money and questionable deals, he refused to participate in a very lucrative but ethically dubious project. He lost a lot of money but maintained his reputation, and he never regretted it. I added. The evening continued, the conversation moving freely from one subject to another. We discussed politics and art, shared memories and anecdotes. At one point, I realized that for the first time in a long while, I felt normal. Not happy, the wound from Rhee's betrayal was still too fresh for happiness, but calm, at peace with myself and my decisions. After the guests departed, I sat by the fireplace, finishing the rest of my scotch and reflecting on the evening. On the people who had come to support me, on their warm words and genuine smiles, on how perhaps family isn't solely about those related by blood, but those who share your values and principles. My phone vibrated.
A mensaje from Hallie.
Thanks for tonight, Erwin. Remember that you are not alone in this struggle.
We're alone your side.
I smiled, feeling warmth spread across my chest. Yes, I had lost a son. Yes, I may never see him again. But I am not alone. I have friends, support, and the respect of people whose opinions truly matter to me. The next morning, I awoke with an unusual sense of energy and purpose. After a quick breakfast, I went to the garage, where I kept old boxes of items I hadn't sorted through in years. Among them was a cello, an instrument I had played in my youth but abandoned when my career and family consumed all my time. I pulled out the case, opened it. The cello was dusty, and the strings were loose, but otherwise the instrument seemed fine. I carefully wiped the body with a soft cloth, tuned the strings as best I could by ear, and drew the bow across them. The sound was awful, squeaky, false. I laughed. Well, Erwin, I said to myself, it looks like you have much to relearn. That same day, I found the name of a good string instrument repairman in South Sioux City online and took the cello to him. I also enrolled in lessons with a teacher at the local music school, a kind middle-aged woman named Vivian Price, who, upon hearing my story, agreed to provide private lessons to an adult beginner with limited experience. You know, Mr. Travers, she said as we discussed schedules, many people your age are afraid to start something new. They think it's too late to learn, but it's not. It's never too late to return to something you love or to discover something entirely new.
Her words lingered with me, echoing in my head as I drove home. It's never too late to return to what you love.
I thought of Eleanor, of our dreams of old age that never materialized. Of Rhee. Of the love I had for him when he was small, of shattered hopes and new possibilities. Perhaps that is what life is all about, constantly bidding farewell to some dreams and embracing others. Constantly renewing and adapting. A continuous search for equilibrium between what we have lost and what we can still find. That evening, I received a letter from Rhee's attorney, a formal notice of his intent to contest my will on the grounds of cognitive impairments affecting my ability to make rational decisions. I read the document without much emotion, then carefully placed it in a folder with other legal papers and called Haley. He's truly doing it, I said when she answered, trying to have me declared incompetent. We're prepared for that, Erwin, Haley replied confidently. We have all the proof we need. Don't worry. I'm not worried, I replied, surprised by my own calmness. I just want this to be over so I can move on. It will be, she promised. Trust me. After speaking with Haley, I went out into the garden. It was a quiet evening in early November, the air cool and clear. Most of the maple leaves had already fallen, forming a golden carpet on the ground. Eleanor's roses were gone for the winter, but some bushes still displayed stubborn buds, refusing to yield to the cold. I stood, breathing in the autumn air, and felt a strange tranquility. Yes, a struggle lay ahead. Yes, my own son had become my adversary, but I was ready for it. I had the support of friends, a legal defense, a clear mind, and strong resolve, and most importantly, a clear conscience. I knew I had acted correctly in protecting myself from manipulation and fraud, even if the source of those actions was my own son. The sun was setting, coloring the sky in shades of pink and purple. I gazed at the horizon and thought about the future. Cello lessons, volunteering at the community center, new friends and new interests, a life that continued no matter what. Eleanor would be proud, I thought. Not because of the break with Ree, that would have broken her heart, of course, but because of my determination to move forward, to not give up, to not let grief and betrayal define my life. I turned and walked slowly toward the house, feeling the cold air tingle my cheeks. Tomorrow would be a new day, and I would greet it with an open heart and a clear mind, ready for whatever it brought. 6 months is both a long and short period. Long enough for the seasons to change, for South Sioux City's harsh winter to yield to a gentle spring. Short enough that the memories of last October remain fresh in my mind. I sit in the living room in front of the open window, filling the house with the sounds of the cello. It's the D minor scale, not the most challenging, but I'm still returning to basic exercises to strengthen my fingers and regain technique. The cello rests between my knees like an old friend who has patiently awaited our reunion all these years. Vivian Price, my teacher, says I'm making remarkable progress for someone who hasn't touched an instrument in almost 40 years. You have musical memory in your fingers, Mr. Travers, she said at our last lesson. Your hands remember what the mind has forgotten. I think of this as I play a simple melody, Saint-Saëns, The Swan, about musical memory, about how some things remain with us forever, even if we don't engage with them for decades. Like my love for Eleanor, which didn't vanish with her death, it merely transformed. Like my love for my son, despite his betrayal, despite our separation, despite the bitterness and disappointment, it's still somewhere inside, like a forgotten melody that my fingers suddenly recall the first time I touched the strings. The last 6 months have been a period of recovery and revelation. After that court case in December, a brief but unpleasant trial in which Ree attempted to contest my will and establish guardianship over me, life slowly returned to normal. Normal, but different. The court fully sided with me. Haley presented the case brilliantly. Dr. Chang's medical report, testimony from bank employees about Ree's attempted fraud, my articles in the local newspaper, and volunteer work, it all painted a picture of a man in perfect health and with a clear mind. Reese and Audrey appeared exactly as they were. Greedy relatives attempting to seize property from an elderly person. Judge Lomax, a stern woman with a discerning eye, not only dismissed Ree's lawsuit but also issued a private ruling condemning his attempted abuse of the judicial process. The court cannot be a tool in family conflicts over money, she declared in her closing argument. After the trial, Ree tried to speak with me, but I walked past without slowing my step. What more was there to say? We had both made our choices. I haven't seen him since. Noel occasionally brings news. Reese and Audrey have sold their house and moved to another city, Minneapolis. Ree's brokerage firm went bankrupt, as predicted. There was some history with the Securities Commission, but it didn't go to court. Apparently, Ree managed to somehow resolve the matter with client funds. However, his broker's license was suspended. Audrey, as far as I know, has taken a job at a law firm in Minneapolis. Not as prestigious as her previous position, but still. I finish the melody and set the cello aside. My fingers tire faster than they used to. Age takes its toll, but I play every day, gradually increasing my practice time. It has become a form of meditation, a way of communicating with the past and the present simultaneously. My phone rings.
It's Mabel Donovan from the Community Center.
I started volunteering there back in November, initially just to demonstrate that I was quite capable and active. But then I became deeply involved. It turned out that my experience as a financial analyst was in high demand among the city's older residents, many of whom face complex financial decisions, from retirement planning to protecting themselves from scammers.
Irwin. Mabel's voice sounds cheerful, as always.
Could you provide some additional consulting today? We have a new visitor, Mrs. Chen. She's just lost her husband and is completely bewildered by financial matters. Of course, Mabel, I replied.
Ella videra 2 o'clock.
You're a lifesaver, she says with relief. I don't know what we would have done without you.
As he hang up the phone, y smile.
It's humorous how life unfolds. 6 months ago, I was a lonely old man, almost isolated from the world, quietly living out my days in an empty house. Now, my calendar is full. Cello lessons on Mondays and Thursdays, volunteering at the center on Tuesdays and Fridays, chess with Noel on Wednesdays, occasional poetry nights at the library on Saturdays. Sundays, I usually rest, work in the garden, or read. I go to the kitchen to prepare a light lunch before heading downtown. As I pass the front door, I notice an envelope slipped underneath. The mailman must have come by while I was playing and didn't hear the bell. I pick up the envelope, plain, white, unmarked. Someone delivered it personally. On the front is my name in familiar handwriting. Rhee's handwriting. I stand in the hallway, holding the envelope, feeling my heart begin to beat faster. 6 months of no contact, and here's a letter. Part of me wants to immediately discard it without reading. The other part, the part that still remembers the little boy playing in the garden under the maple tree, wants to tear the envelope open right now. I take a deep breath and place the letter on the hall table. Lunch first, then the center.
Deleter can what?
The day passes with its usual responsibilities. I counsel Mrs. Chen, a small woman with eyes full of grief and confusion. Her husband died suddenly, leaving her with many financial questions for which she lacks answers. We address her situation step by step. Insurance, pension, taxes, bank accounts. By the end of the counseling session, she seems calmer, even smiling, thanking me. "You have no idea how helpful this has been, Mr. Travers," she says, shaking my hand with both her small palms. It's the first time in a month I've felt like I could manage. I nod, understanding her feelings better than she can imagine. Losing a spouse is like plummeting into an abyss. At first, it feels like you'll never reach the bottom, never be able to stop the fall, but at some point, it slows, and you realize you will survive. That life continues, albeit differently.
After the center, y met Noel at the Blue Cap.
We don't play chess. We just drink coffee and discuss politics, the latest book we've read, the upcoming South Sioux City Music Festival. "By the way," Noel says casually, "I hear Rhee is back in town. Not for long. Something about selling their old house." I nod, not truly surprised. "He left a letter under my door today." Noel raises an eyebrow. "And I haven't read it yet." Noel gives me a steady look. "Are you going to?" "I don't know," I answer honestly. Part of me wants to know what he wrote. The other part thinks it's best to leave things as they are. Noel rubs his beard thoughtfully.
"Whatever you decide, you know I support you."
"I know."
I smile at my old friend.
"And I appreciate it more than I can express." Back home in the evening, I see the envelope on the table again. It lies there like a ticking device, ready to disrupt my hard-won peace. I pick it up and go into my study. I sit down in a chair by the window, where I can see the garden.
It's full of spring flowers now.
Eleanor's roses haven't bloomed yet, but the buds are swelling, promising blossoms soon. Slowly, I open the envelope, pulling out a folded piece of paper.
Father, the letter begins.
I know you probably don't want to see or hear from me after everything that's happened. I wouldn't want to if I were you either, but I have to try. I'm back in South Sioux City for a few days to take care of the last formalities of selling the house. I'd like to meet you if you're willing. Not to ask for money or to challenge your judgment, just to talk. I've learned a lot these past few months. I've been rethinking many things. If you're ready to hear me out, give me a call.
My number's the same. Re.
I reread the letter several times. It seems sincere, devoid of the usual manipulation. Perhaps Rhee has genuinely realized something. Maybe losing everything, status, money, home, has compelled him to reevaluate his life and values. Or perhaps it's just a new strategy to get at my money. A new tactic after direct attempts and a lawsuit failed. I fold the letter and tuck it away in my desk drawer. I don't discard it, but I don't pick up the phone either. Not today. Maybe tomorrow, or the day after that, or never. Instead, I pick up the cello.
Tonight, I want to play something new. Vivien gab me the shit music for faures après un rêve.
It's a little beyond my current skill level, but she said sometimes it's good to tackle something challenging. I start playing slowly, stumbling at difficult passages, but not giving up.
The music fills the house, pushing out the silence, pushing out the memories, pushing out the doubts.
A week passes. Rhee's letter still rests in my desk drawer, untouched since that first reading. I think about him daily, but I never dare call him. Not out of pride or anger, just caution. I've invested too much energy rebuilding my life to risk another disappointment. Friday night, after volunteering at the center, I stop by the Blue Cup for a coffee. Hugh, as usual, greets me with a friendly smile.
Irwin, black without sugar, as usual.
You know me too well, Hugh. I smile back. I sit down at my and Noelle's usual table by the window, even though I'm alone tonight. Hugh brings coffee and lingers for a moment. Saw your son today, he says casually. He was asking about you. I look up.
What about me?
He asked if you still come here regularly. How you look. Hugh shrugs. I said you were fine.
Better than fine, to be honest.
Said you play the cello, help people at the center. I nod, unsure what to say in response. He looked different, Hugh continues. Not as arrogant as he used to be. More. I don't know, more genuine. Thank you, Hugh, I say. I appreciate you telling me. Hugh shrugs again and goes to serve other customers.
I sit, sipping my coffee, looking out the window at the street.
People pass by, going about their business, talking, laughing, living their lives. I think about Rhee, about what Hugh said. More authentic. What does that imply? Has my son truly changed, or is it just a new facade?
When I get home, I retrieve the letter again.
I reread it, trying to discern his true intentions between the lines. Then I pull out my phone, locate Rhee's number in my contacts. My finger hovers over the call button, but I don't call. Instead, I walk to the garden shears in hand. Eleanor's roses require care if I want them to bloom beautifully this summer. Working among the bushes, I feel a strange peacefulness. Life continues, with or without Rhee. I forged a new reality for myself, with music, with volunteer work, with new friends and old hobbies. I am no longer that lonely old man trapped in an empty house with ghosts of the past.
I am living in the present.
Another week passes. I learn from Noelle that Rhee has left town, having finalized his dealings with the house without waiting for my call.
I feel a pan.
Not exactly regret, more like contemplation. Did I make the right choice by not meeting him? Or did I miss an opportunity for reconciliation? But then I remember everything I've endured. The lies, the manipulation, the attempted theft, the legal struggle. Trust, once broken, is difficult to mend. And sometimes the cost of trust is too high. May turns to June. Eleanor's roses bloom, filling the garden with fragrance and color.
I continue my cello lessons, making progress.
Vivian suggests I could play at the music school's summer concert.
Nothing complicated, just a short piece.
I agree, though the thought of performing before an audience is a little daunting. In mid-June, I receive another letter from Rhee, this time by mail from Minneapolis. I open it with less anticipation than the first. Father, he writes, I understand your decision not to see me. I have earned it. I just want you to know I truly have changed. Or at least I'm trying to. Audrey and I broke up. I got a job. Not in finance, just a regular office worker. It's modest, but honest. I also started attending a support group for people with gambling addictions. Yes, I had a problem that I hid from everyone, even Audrey. That's not an excuse for what I did, but perhaps an explanation. I'm not asking you to forgive me or bring me back into your life. I just wanted you to know that your actions, as painful as they were, finally made me face the truth. Maybe that was exactly what I needed.
Re.
I fold the letter and tuck it away beside the first one in my desk drawer. I don't respond, but I don't throw it away either. I need time to consider it, to decide if I'm ready to open that door again or if it's better to leave it closed. On the last day of June, I perform at the music school concert.
Y play a simple piece by Bach, de aria.
My hands shake slightly with excitement, but I manage. People applaud politely, showing respect for an elderly man who had the courage to go on stage and display his imperfect but heartfelt art. After the concert, Vivian approaches me, hugs me.
You were wonderful, Irwin. I got lost in the third measure, say, smiling.
No one noticed. And it doesn't matter. What matters is that you did it. That you weren't afraid to try.
Her words stay with me as I walk home on this warm summer evening.
Not afraid to try. Isn't that what it's all about? Not perfection, not being flawless, but the courage to attempt. The willingness to take risks even when you know you might make a mistake or fail.
I sit in a chair on the veranda, looking out over the garden, bathed in the evening sun. Eleanor's roses are blooming, red, pink, white.
The maple tree we planted 30 years ago spreads its branches, providing welcome shade. Life continues despite losses and disappointments. I think of his letters, about the fact that he seems to be genuinely trying to change, about how perhaps my decision to cut ties, however painful, has actually helped him embark on a path of correction. I don't know if I'll ever answer his letters. I don't know if I will allow him back into my life. That decision is yet to be made, and I won't rush it. But one thing I do know is that I don't regret my choice, for protecting myself, my dignity, my principles, for not allowing fear of loneliness or guilt to make me accept unacceptable behavior. For finding the strength to begin a new chapter of life when the previous one ended so bitterly. Sometimes principles have a price. Sometimes it's the price of relationships, connections, comfort. But without principles, we lose ourselves, our essence, our self-respect. And that's a loss that no amount of external consolation can compensate for. The sun is setting, coloring the sky in shades of golden purple. I sit on the veranda of my house, alone, but not lonely, with a sense of peace that comes not from a perfect life, but from a life lived according to my own values. From a life in which I made the hard but right choices. Tomorrow will be a new day, with a cello